Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Encounter Live. This is God's day that He's created. We have to make a decision that, regardless of what happens in the day, that we're going to be excited. We're going to be rejoicing in the life that He's gave us, and as a result of His goodness and His mercy that renews itself every morning, we have a right to be grateful, thankful, and for that, we give Him praise. Here's what I need you to do for me. I need you to invite somebody, share, tell them Encounter Live is on. And we'll be back right after this. And good morning. We are back. Welcome to Encounter Live. I wish that you would invite somebody, share. I want to share this worship tune with you, and we'll get started right after this. Invite somebody, share. Today we're going to be talking about the kingdom is going to the underdog. The underdog is Generation Next. It's Generation Us. It's those of us that have been overlooked, underappreciated, overworked, underpaid. We didn't have the look. We didn't have the title. We didn't have what it took to be in the upper echelon of this world society. And I'm telling you, there's a transfer that's happening because the kingdom is going to the underdog. I'm going to play this worship tune. After this, we're going to talk about it.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. And all my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, sing of the goodness. Sing, I love your voice. Oh, you have led me through the fire and darkest nights. You are close like no other. Yeah, I know you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Oh, and all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. Every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. Yes, you have. And all of my life you've been so good. goodness. Oh, I'll sing of your splendor. I'll sing of your favor. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after. It's running after me. My life laid down. I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. Help me sing it. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. Yes, it is, God. Your goodness is running after. It's running after. My life laid down. My life laid down. I surrender now. Give you everything. Your goodness is running out. It's running out to me. Yes, it is. And all my life you have been faithful. All of my life you have been so, so good, yeah. And with every breath, God, that I'm able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Yes, you have, God, all of my life. So, so every breath that I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Take a moment, just think about his goodness.
Invite somebody, share. We're going to start right after this worship tune.
Think about his goodness.
Invite somebody, share.
I see evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Yeah, yeah. Can you say that? I see the evidence. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life. Oh, all over my life. Think about it one time. Yeah. I see the promises in fulfillment coming to pass. All over my life. You are a promise keeper. All over my life. I see the evidence of your goodness. I see the evidence of your goodness. Said I see your promises in fulfillment. I see your promises in fulfillment. All over my life. All over my life. Genesis to Revelation, I see the evidence of your goodness. All over my life. All over my life. See your promises. I see your promises fulfilled. All over my life. All over my life. Clap your hands if you can say, see it. I see the evidence of your goodness.
over my life.
Think about it.
Yeah.
All over my life. Take a minute or two and thank the Lord for what He's done. I see your promises and fulfillment.
All over my life. All over my life. We've got a couple of more minutes of this worship tune, then we're going to get started in the word. Invite somebody, share. Oh, yeah. All over my life.
We're getting ready to throw to something kind of special. We're singing. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life.
Come on, worship him, everybody. If you've seen the evidence of his goodness, his promises in fulfillment, you should worship him.
Smile when you sing it one more time. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life. God, I want to thank you. All over my life. I've been living in the goodness of God. I see the promises and fulfillment. Stay with me. All over my life. Stay with it. All over my life. All over my life. All over my life. All over my life. I'll be right here. All over my life. My goodness is running after. It's running after me. Your goodness is running after. Running after me. Your goodness is running.
Listen to me.
It's running after.
His goodness is running after me. I've seen the evidence of his goodness all over my life. I've seen his promises in fulfillment all over my life. His grace, his mercy has ran after me, captured me. He's captivated me and captured me by his love. And for that, I am ever, ever, ever grateful. I will live the rest of my days to honor him in fulfillment of the love that he's given me. And that should be all of our testimony this morning. Man, I am turned. That's really got me going. I just need a minute. Woo! When you think about the deserving of his goodness, when you think about how we've missed the mark, and still, in spite of our ups and downs and inconsistencies in life, God remains faithful. Not only does he remain faithful in his character, he remains faithful to us. That's a benefit of his goodness. And for that, I'm grateful. So I got to shake that off because I just want to do a little bit more. I really do. I want to lay down in that, but I cannot. I'm already running behind. So good morning, everybody. Encounter, good morning to all of you that are watching. Good morning to you. This morning, we're going to be talking about the kingdom is going to the underdog. The kingdom is going to the Underdog. Our story this morning can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 15. Read the whole chapter when you get an opportunity. It's a very interesting story of how Saul disobeyed God. Saul's disobedience to God. God warned Saul, told Saul, gave him specific instructions to go down to Gilgal. He said, kill everything there, kill everything that alive, livestock, dogs, cats, kill it all, wipe it out. Because Gilgal was an enemy to the people of God. And as a result of that, as a result of some of the things that they had done to the people of God, as a result of their oppression to the people of God, God had told King Saul to destroy and kill everything. All right. Now, here's the deal. There are a couple of things that I need to mention about Saul and his stature. According to history, Saul was a good-looking man. Saul was about 6'6", 6'7". He was tall, very good to look at. Saul was a ladies' man. The women loved Saul. Saul was his frame was very masculine. Saul had muscles. He was built. Saul looked like a king. And I think that's important to bring out because so much of success in our day is based off your look. So much of society's success is capitalized off of your stature. You don't believe me? Go to Instagram, Facebook, and these other social media sites and just look at how many people are showing their body. They're bragging about their physique. They're turning sideways so you can see the whole frame because popularity in today's time is gained how you look. That didn't just start. Ecclesiastes 1 said there's nothing new up under the sun. Everything is a repeat of history. So Saul looked up to par. He was a man of stature. He was a man of war. And as a result of that, God chose him to be the king after Israel rejected God. God wanted to be their king. He wanted to be their leader. Israel says, no, we want somebody that looked like us. You know, you got to be careful at what you pray for. You got to be careful how you choose to pray to God and ask God what to give you. Because a lot of times we can release our faith in an area and grab something that we really desire that looks like us. Yeah. God, keep me away from things that does not resemble your heart, your mind, and your character, and cause me to be a magnet to draw things to me that represent your heart. So many times we choose mates, we choose spouses on the basis of their outer appearance alone. Now, I'm a strong proponent to believe that I believe you can have it all. I believe they can look good. I believe they can have the right mindset. I believe that they can have faith. I believe that they can have a strong prayer life and have influence on those that are around them to seek the heart of God. I do believe that. But you can't choose anybody to walk with you and to do life with just based on looks alone. Saul had the look. Saul had the physique. Saul represent what a man should look like in his day. And he disobeyed God. God told him to destroy everything. Here's what Saul did. Saul killed and destroyed things that were insignificant to him. We have to be careful that we don't filter through what God has caused us to do or told us to do and pick out the parts we like, do the parts that benefit us, and not capture and obey the entire message. God told him to wipe everything out. Here's what he did. He killed everything that didn't matter to him. He destroyed everything that didn't matter to him. But the things that were precious to Saul, he kept, including the king. And God had given Samuel, who's the prophet of the day, who happens to be the mouthpiece of God, represented God in the earth. God had given Samuel a word. Samuel, upon meeting Saul, after he had left what he was supposed to destroy, Saul now lies to the prophet of God, the mouthpiece of God, and says, I've done what the Lord's commanded. We have to be careful in selective obedience. When God tells you to do something, I can guarantee you that present obedience opens the door for future prosperity. It's not always about the now. The now is the beginning for later. One of the reasons that God had told Saul to kill this king is because he would later on become a enemy, not just to his people, but to Queen Esther and all of those that God calls to walk. There were a lot of things that she had to deal with because of Saul's disobedience. A lot of times, the wrath that we are experiencing is a result of somebody not obeying God. Your obedience to God in your gift and what God has given to you is the key to freedom for somebody else. This is why it's important. It's imperative. It's of vital importance that you obey every word that God has said, because you don't know what liberation that it's going to bring to somebody else. So he disobeyed God. He lied to the prophet. And when the prophet called him out, the prophet confronted Saul and held him accountable for his lies. He said, well, I've killed everything and I've done what the Lord told me to do. And the prophet Samuel looks at Saul and says, what meaneth the blabbeth of the sheep? In other words, I hear sheep still alive in my ear. It is very important that when we're confronted with the word of the Lord, especially the word that causes us to be uncomfortable, it's important that if the word causes us to be uncomfortable, that we not reject the word and pull up our shield to cover ourselves. But when the word of the Lord comes to expose areas and enemies in our life, that we open up our life and we are honest about where we are, what we've done, what we haven't done, because the beginning to restoring the relationship that you have with God, that we've allowed our disobedience to build a breach between us and him. The beginning of restoration starts with obedience. Half-hearted obedience, partial obedience is 100% disobedience. God told him to get rid of everything, and he kept what he wanted. Sometimes God would test you and cause you to give what you had so you can see where your heart really is. When your heart is properly aligned with the heart of God, giving things is not a problem because you understand that it belongs to God anyway. And the same God that gave you this, that blessed you with this, is able to do it again. This is why we have to partner with those that are in ministry that are trying to further the kingdom, because it's in our partnership that we unlock the provisions in the earth that God has for us. If you have a dream, if you have a vision, if you have something that you're supposed to be doing and the provision is not there, that is a good thing, because it causes you to walk in faith and trust in God that he's going to provide. Where there is vision, there will be provision. But if you're in a place where you can supply all your need, if your dream is big enough for your budget, you're not dreaming big enough, you're not dreaming hard enough, and I can guarantee you that that dream does not match what God has placed inside of you. What God has given you is bigger than your budget. It's so big that you will not be able to accomplish it by yourself. God is going to use you as a magnet in the earth to draw those to you that will help provide for the vision that he's placed inside of you. And one of the things that you've got to remember when you're activating this vision, when you're activating this dream, that you don't take credit for what belongs to God. I know he gave you the vision. I know he gave you the idea. You may be soaring. People may be blessed by it, but it is very important that you understand this vision and this dream does not belong to you. It belongs to God. So when people pat you on the back, it's okay to say thank you, but you better turn around and say, to God be the glory, because if it had not been for the goodness of God and his ability to give you what he has, you wouldn't be where you are. You don't deserve the seat that you're sitting in. You don't deserve the love that God is giving to you. You don't deserve his faithfulness towards you. So don't you get high and mighty. Don't you get beside yourself and start taking credit for only what God has allowed mercy and grace to bring. God will give you ideas for you to exercise in the earth, supply the grace that is needed for it to manifest in the earth. He will even allow you to get some of the credit, but at the end of the day, you need to understand you're not that great, you're not that good, and don't you get caught up into thinking more higher than you should. At the end of the day, when the story is told and all is said and done, your response should be, if it had not been for the grace of God. Yes, I've succeeded in business. Yes, I have the ability to make money. Yes, God has blessed the work of my hands. Yes, God has blessed my mind. God has caused me to have influence amongst my peers and others in the world. But at the end of the day, it wasn't me and it wasn't what I have alone. If I didn't have what I had and matched it with the grace of God, I would not have the ability to do what I've done. Therefore, I cannot take the credit. Therefore, I cannot allow you to lift me up. If it had not been for God who was on my side, I would not have made it this far. It was God that brought me out when my heart was broken. It was God that brought me up when they told me I couldn't be anything. It was God revealing his goodness, revealing his favor, and giving me the grace to sustain, to build, and to do the things that I've done. So don't you give me any credit. Don't you lift me up the way Saul lifted himself up. But when you see the things that I've done, when you see the successes and the battles that I won, let it be known, if there be any victory, the cause and the thanksgiving goes to Calvary, because once again, if it had not been for God who was on my side, I could not have done what I've been able to do. And you've got to make sure that you stay in a place of thanksgiving. You've got to make sure that you stay in a place of obedience. You've got to make sure that you stay in a place where you don't think it was just you by yourself. No, God had people praying for you. God had people lifting you. God had people interceding for you. And whatever you've done, the good that you believe you've given, the only reason you've been able to do it is God has angels encamped around you. God has had a support system around you. And whether you know it or not, God has supernaturally connected you to people that are praying over you, praying for you, so that you can continue to be what God has called you to do. And here's the deal. God's not looking for perfection out of you. Oh, no, he's not expecting you to be perfect. All of us have gone astray. Every one of us have turned to our own lusts. The scriptures have even declared that when a man is tempted, let no man say he is tempted of God, neither does God tempt any man. For every man, when he is tempted, he's drawn away by his own lusts. All of us have something in us that is trying to pull us away from the will of God and keep us from obeying what God has called us in the earth. But God has a Samuel for every Saul in the earth. What does that mean? When you go left, before you get too far, God's going to send you a voice. It's going to be a strange voice. It's going to be an unlikely resource. Be someone you would never expect. You're going to meet them in odd places, and God is going to use them as a voice for your life to keep you on the straight and narrow and remind you of the grace of God that has been given to you for you to accomplish his will in the earth. This is why we need each other. This is why God makes supernatural connections. It's not to judge you. It's not to rob you. It's not to take from you. It's to add to you and remind you of who God is in your life. God is your source. Not your money, not your position, not your wife, not your family, not your job, not your investments, your 401k or your annuities or CDs, not your offshore accounts. It is God that is your source. And you have to remind yourself that God is my source, because your mind will lie to you and cause you to believe, because you have resources, that somehow you're greater than somebody else. And that's where the pride with Saul began, when he exalted himself above what God had told him to do. We all have to obey God. We all get to a point where we get away from what God has said, and God has to send a voice. He has to send a Samuel to remind us. It's in humility that God begins to build honor. Your honor comes through humility. It comes to you saying, God, I thank you for what you have caused me to do and caused me to be. And Saul failed to give thanks and praise to God. He failed to obey God. He took credit and took the things that he wanted, and he totally ignored everything that God called him to do. Now, here's the thing. When you understand succession, whoever is king, the firstborn automatically receives the crown as their inheritance because of who their daddy was. Because Saul disobeyed God, God stripped the kingdom from Saul. Not only did he strip it from him and take it from him, he took it from the generations that were supposed to have it next. Be careful of your disobedience. You are setting the pace for the next generation. What you do not overcome, you will leave for the next generation to struggle through. Don't make it hard for the next generation. Obey God in your life. Obey the things that God's called you to do, and you will overcome everything that is trying to hinder you. And because of Saul's disobedience, because Saul chose to do things his way, he robbed future generations of their inheritance. So many of us are fighting. We're fighting through, we're fighting out of generational curses that have been placed on our family because our fathers did not obey God. They didn't break the curse. Let me help y'all out too. Let me tell you something else. You don't break the curse with prayer. And yes, I believe in oil, which is a representation of anointing. You don't break no curses by throwing oil on people, by blowing on them. You don't break curses by throwing Benny Hinn's jacket. That's not how you break the curse. There's only one way to break a curse, and that is through total obedience. Here's the proof. Here's the proof. If prayer could break the curse, Jesus never would have come and been obedient to the death of the cross. If prayer could break the curse, we know that he's in heaven, sitting at the right hand of the throne, forever making intercession on my behalf. So if prayer alone was the key, he would have prayed for us, and he would not have had to die for us. But because obedience is the only thing that breaks the curse, you got to obey God to make future generations better. What has God told you to do? Answer that. What has he given you command to do? Who has he called you to be in the earth? Who has he linked you to that you've been disobedient in supporting the vision that God's placed inside of them? Obedience is the only thing that breaks the curse. The word says, if you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good of the land. Saul in his lies say, well, we save the best so that we can make a sacrifice to God. Now he's trying to manipulate and use worship as a tool to hide from God and disobey what God has called him to do. And the prophet calls him out. Your worship is no good without your obedience. You can't give and be obedient. You've got to obey and give. So God strips the mantle from Saul and his family, and he finds an unlikely character named David and passes the baton to him. I want to talk about David for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to be done. I'm not going to finish this today. David is the sibling of 7 other brothers. David, and this is very important, is the 8th child. God tells Samuel, go to Jesse's house, and for there I found myself a king. Now, God talks in portions. He does not reveal the entire loaf. He gives you crumbs. He tells you what you need to know when you need to know it. He tells Samuel, I found me a king in Jesse's house. But when Samuel gets there, he gets ready to ordain and anoint the first son, because the first son resembles the likeness of Saul. He's tall, he's handsome, he's strong, and he looks like a king. I'm telling you the message today that the kingdom promotion is going to the underdog. Samuel gets ready to anoint the first son because he resembled Saul. And the oil in the ram's horn would not flow. The oil represents the grace of ability. It's God's ability to rest upon you to do things you cannot do in your own strength. How many things you've grabbed and God's grace of oil is not flowing? So it did not flow. Then God sends Samuel the prophet, and he tells him something great. Don't be looking at their IG account and how many followers they have to decide who they're going to be. He says, man looks on the outer appearance. They may not have a big church. They may not have a huge following. They may not be what society say they should be. But God looks at the heart, and the kingdom is going to the underdog. Least likely to succeed. The one that has been overlooked, the one that has been left behind. God will hide you behind the cleft of the rock because he has greater in store for you. Don't you ever be discouraged when you don't get promotion. Don't you ever be discouraged when the door is slammed in your face. Don't you ever be discouraged when somebody walks off and leave you. That is God saving you and hiding you because he has something greater for you. So the prophet Samuel starts to look at the other sons. And when he gets to the 7th son, he done been through 7 boys, and the oil does not flow. God's grace of ability does not pour out of the ram's horn. Because you can't force God to anoint what he has not chosen. Some of us have chosen things, chosen marriages, chosen people, chosen occupation, chosen businesses and boats that God didn't call us to choose. And as a result, we're praying for God to anoint what he has not called. In order for you to get it right and get God's ability on your side, you're going to have to go back and obey what he told you to do. And I know I got that right. So now listen to this. Jesse, the prophet tells Jesse, bring me all your sons. Jesse brings everybody out but David. So David is the overlooked son. He's in the lower parts of the valley tending to stinking sheep. David has been left out of his own party. David has been left out of his own promotion. But you don't have to worry about being left out. You don't have to worry about being forgotten. You don't have to worry about being overlooked, because when God's time is right for you to rise and to be promoted, he's not going to let the oil fall without you being present. And the prophet says to Jesse, now, I done tried to anoint these boys, and none of them has God's seal of approval. Do you have another child? God is going to use somebody somewhere to use their power, their ability, and their influence to bless you. And when it's your time, I don't care where they've tried to hide you. I don't care where they've tried to ignore you. I don't care how many times they've overlooked you. God's not going to let the party start until your presence have been made. And Jesse says, yeah, well, I do have another boy. How you forget your son? How do you not bring all your sons to the party? Even if your family rejects you, even if your family doesn't recognize what's in you, they can't stop what God has for you. And when the time is right, you're going to rise. David, the 8th son, is now summoned from keeping sheep. And when he comes before the prophet, the oil begins to flow. God's heart begins to pour out because he's found himself someone that will seek his heart and not his hand. Too many of us are looking for the benefits and we're not seeking the heart of obedience. I'm going to finish this later. It's getting real good to me now. David is the 8th son. 8 is new beginnings. King David becomes now the mirror. He becomes the model for New Testament worship. Because God had required them to bring all animals and grain offerings. And up under David's reign, God said, because I found me a person that will dance and worship me, you don't have to bring me a lamb. You don't have to bring me a goat. You don't have to bring me a bull or a pigeon, but enter into the gates with thanksgiving, enter into my courts with praise, be thankful unto me and bless his name. David is the beginning of something new. The one that was left out, the one that was overlooked, the one who didn't have opportunity, voted least likely to succeed, is now leading the charge, and all Israel become his. God's getting ready to give you everything that the enemy thought he took from you. He is. He's getting ready to turn it over in your hands. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be mindful, remain prayerful, and do all that God has called you to do. Listen, that's Encounter for today. We'll finish this another time. I've got a lot to say about this story. Trust me, it ain't even over. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you would like to sow and help what we're doing on this side, we're going back to network TV. We need your gifts. We need your financial support. You can give through the Cash App. It's $Encounter Church 8. Or you can contact me in my inbox. Reach out to me. Tell me your method of giving, whether it be check, Zelle, Apple Pay. And I'll make sure you have the information so that you can help us. God bless you. Thank you for listening. In all of your getting, get understanding. I love you. Have a great week. And remember, just because they reject you doesn't mean that God hadn't forgotten you. Just because they forget you doesn't mean that God has forgotten you. You've got to understand that the plan of God is going to manifest. And when the time is right, you're going to get everything that you deserve and more. God bless you all. Have a great week.